everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us for our LinkedIn Live event, where we'll be discussing how to leverage your skills to forge a new career path. If you're seeing me, you are in the right place. Before we get started, just a quick reminder, there will be no link required. So no need to click any links. If you have any comments, we welcome our comments and questions, but we want to ask you to click any links. And so with that, I'd like to introduce myself. I am Uza Darazada. I'm the Vice President of the Eaton Business System here at Eaton, and I've been with Eaton for close to 22 years and have had various roles in both operations and commercial and sales roles, as well as some staff level corporate roles. And so I'm really excited to have this discussion with my three esteemed panelists. We're going to kick it off with Drew Horansky, who's going to join us here to introduce himself.
Hi, Uza. Thank you very much for that. Yeah, my name is Drew Horansky. I am a senior manager in corporate communications at Eaton. I've been here for the past 4 years, made the switch after 22 years of working in broadcast journalism, both in local newsrooms and then also nationally and even traveling for international assignments. Here at Eaton, I support the corporate communications function, specifically ethics and compliance, inclusion and diversity. I do some of our media relations as well, and manage some of our annual corporate reports. And let's turn it over to Allison.
Thanks, Drew. Hi, everybody. I'm Allison Magyari. I lead IT, business relationship management, and then I also lead IT for our aerospace group. Really thrilled to have been at Eaton, just coming up on 12 years, and it's been a huge blessing. Boris, over to you.
Thanks. So, hi everyone. I'm Barış Gür. I'm the product manager for software and energy transition services. So, mainly working on data center softwares and electric vehicle charging stations and energy storage systems. Almost 4 years in Eaton. In the same time, I'm a professional fencing player. I'm so excited to be here today. Looking forward to it.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much. So I want to kick off. I want to start off by giving me a little bit more of an overview of what you've done and really how you ended up where you are now. Maybe we can start with you, Drew. Can you give us a little bit more? You mentioned being in media, so I'm excited to see that transition.
Yeah, I think everything that I sort of set up to do, I ended up changing. So when I went to college, I went to school in Washington, D.C., and I studied international relations with the plan to go work for the Foreign Service. I wanted to work at the State Department, saw myself traveling, maybe as a diplomat. The goal was to maybe one day be an ambassador. And it was actually an internship that I did in college that changed everything for me. I worked at a Washington, D.C. news bureau and really got the bug to do TV news from that standpoint, from that point on. And so did a pivot in college. From that internship, I went and worked in a newsroom in Cleveland behind the scenes, got a resume tape together. And for the next 22 years, I worked in local markets in Dubuque, Iowa, in Michigan, Boston, Chicago, Texas. I was in Austin and in Houston before coming home to Cleveland, which is my hometown, where I was a reporter and weekend anchor here in Cleveland, where my Cleveland office is based. But COVID happened, and family happened, and kids happened, and I started kind of reevaluating what I wanted to get out of a career and how to maybe improve my work-life balance a little bit. And communications is a very popular fit for people who have a background in media. And so you'll find reporters working on a lot of corporate communications teams. We kind of call it going over to the other side because I used to be the one asking questions, and now I sometimes am the one fielding them. But it was a really good fit for me, and it was the perfect time to do it. And, I'm not looking back at all.
That's awesome. What about you, Allison?
Yeah, I've been so lucky to have been in IT for almost 20 years now. But it's funny, if you would have asked me in my high school days, what would you want to be? I actually wanted to be a first grade teacher. But when I was in high school, I ended up having a back surgery that prevented me from taking gym class at the time. And instead, they put me into a lot of technology and computer classes. So by the time I was 16 years old, I had certifications from Microsoft and Cisco, and really just loved the entire technology realm. So I ended up pivoting before I went to college to major in computer information systems. And then I've been working in IT ever since. So I've been lucky I started in help desk fixing computers, moved on to internal audit and got to see that side of IT. Manage global infrastructure. And it's funny, all of the pieces seemed a little bit disjointed. But now that I'm in this role leading IT for business relationship management and for aerospace, all the pieces have really come together. And it's kind of interesting too, because when, at that time I had back surgery, I also started to take yoga as a way to heal from that and to just feel better in my body. And I ended up actually becoming a certified yoga instructor as well. So it's been so rewarding to have kind of two seemingly very different careers. But at the core, it's all about just trying to make people feel better and to feel comfortable, whether it's in IT or in yoga.
I love it. And Barish, you have to share fencing and product management. Tell me how they come together.
Yeah, sure. So yes, today I'm a product manager, but the background story is quite different, right? So let me start with my sports life. So I started fencing when I was 12 years old as a epee fencer in a city club in Ankara, capital of Turkey. And the rest of the years was quite standard. I was like practicing trainings, participating in the competitions in a national level, and just trying to improve my game. And I think the game I stole was during my university era when I was selected to the national team. So I was able to participate in national, international competitions to represent my country. And that period, I was literally paid by the government to do fencing in monthly salary basis. So it was, I think, my prime era in the fencing. But in the same time, it was a challenging decision to make because either I need to study some sports related studies like most of my teammates, or I needed to choose a study a social science such as management and economics. And I always wanted to do economics. I was really interested in, and I just chose that path. So a new chapter opened in my life. So I started studying economics, but in the same time still doing the trainings, joining the competitions, and so on. I tried to use my activeness in the sports in my studying life. So I was active in the classes in the university. I was really active in the student organizations. I was leading one of the biggest student organizations in Turkey. So I think this brings a lot of advantages to me because I was able to do some internships in international companies in this early era. So this is the first time I like opened up the corporate world, and the rest was like a roller coaster. So I did some studies abroad as well. I lived in 8 different countries, including Belgium, Germany, Poland, and so on. Then how I met with Eaton, it was first with the Early Talent Leadership Development Program. I entered this program. It's like an amazing, excellent rotational program, and I completed the program, and I'm doing this role right now.
Oh, that's incredible. So I'm going to go back to some of the learnings. Allison, what experiences from your kind of prior experience and some of those early experiences that you had have been most valuable in your current role?
Yeah, I'd say there have been so many learnings that I've taken out, but I think really the first piece is just having a natural curiosity. That has served me well from my first position all the way to where I am now. So I think just the ability to admit that we are all learners and we don't know everything, and especially with the pace of change in technology, it's okay not to have the answers to everything, and to know that you can rely on your skill set of learning and asking questions and hands-on trying different things in order to learn something new and to overcome. So I think that's probably been my biggest takeaway. And probably also, just be open to all the different potential, I guess, within your career too. Within IT, it's such a broad frame. And so it's been really nice to be able to pivot and to try new things, but also stay in kind of the general IT framework too. So it's been a blessing.
What about you, Drew? What did you take from all of that experience in media to corporate world?
I think you become somewhat comfortable with putting yourself out there when, you're on TV every day, and, regardless of how you're feeling, what's happening in your day, just, learning to, I think I'm naturally introverted, but I can sort of fake act at being an extrovert. And I think being, really putting myself out there and trying something new and doing something different, every day you have to become kind of a subject matter expert on something. And whether that's politics or sports or, things happening in the city, a family story, that agility and that ability to learn something new and process it quickly and then to therefore present it. I think I got very comfortable with being uncomfortable every day, doing something totally different, doing something that, you know, might have been outside of my comfort zone, and acquainted with risk. And if you've ever worked in a newsroom or you've been in one, it's a lot of different personalities. So I think I really learned to work with a lot of different people under very stressful circumstances. And I think all that, you know, coming together just kind of helps me roll with it and get, you know, comfortable with the fact that when I switched careers, there were a lot of things I didn't know, but, you know, you just kind of have to roll up the sleeves and learn and not beat yourself up too much.
Definitely hearing a theme, right, with that learning agility. What about you, Burish? What experiences did you take into the role that you're in now from your prior experience?
Yeah, so I think from the fencing world, from the sports world, there are some soft skills that I believe they have a huge impact on the professional world. So first of all is the discipline. So in fencing, we always say practice, preparation, and just repetition. So to be able to reach the success, to be able to learn a skill, do something, you have to train again and again and again. And this needs a pure discipline, right? So having this discipline mentality and being able to show this discipline in the work during a project, during a task, maybe during an assignment, I think it can be related, because when you show your discipline in the work, this will bring a positive impact for sure. And as a second point, I would say focus and concentration, because in the fencing, when I put on my mask, when I'm on the piste, I'm completely isolated. No one can disturb me. I focus 100% on my game, on my opponent. So of course in the working life there is no opponent, but we have things to do, we have some work to do, we have tasks and projects. So bringing this focus mentality to work, being able to work on something without being disturbed, and being disturbed is very easy in today's world, as you know. I think it's a good takeaway from the other life.
That's awesome. Allison, how can maybe you can share some tips on how individuals can articulate those transferable skills when they're making a pivot or a transition?
Yeah, I would say probably first, just not to underestimate yourself. I think we're our own worst critics in many ways, but when you step back and look at all of the things that you've overcome, all of the steps that you've taken to get where you are, I think you'd be quite impressed if you were looking at it as if it were somebody else. So being able to take that lens and just really understanding to what have you been through, what are your natural tendencies, or what are you really good at? Are you good at telling stories? Are you good at communication? Are you good at listening? Are you good at empathizing? All of those different pieces, no matter what function you're in, whether it's communications or IT or finance or anything, those are all transferable skills. So I would say really just take an inventory of the things that you like to do, the things that you're naturally good at. And I think that's a really perfect starting ground to build a foundation where you can really use those in many other fields.
Drew, what about you? How would you suggest that people articulate those transferable skills to potential employers?
I think it's important to understand what job you are applying for and to tailor those skills that you offer to that job, because every job comes with its own language and its own sort of vocabulary. And I think in order to communicate in a way that maybe that employer understands, knowing what that employer values and just the language they use. TV has its own language. You know, I could talk about turning a package for 11 and a look live in the morning and a VOSOP for the afternoon, but that really doesn't mean anything in a corporate setting. So how do you maybe use story to illustrate, you know, that you are ethical, that you can make decisions in stressful circumstances, that that you use data to make decisions. You know, in television, we would look at how many people liked a tweet or a story on Facebook, or which newscast won the night before, and that helps inform whether there's follow-up coverage. Something as simple as that, you might not think of in TV or in your world as being important, but you're hitting upon key points that employer may value. So data-driven decision making is huge, and using that, you know, measurement to inform future results. Now you're talking about, you know, the skills that you have that you might take for granted after doing them for so long, and spelling them out in a way that future employer may want. So you have to understand what they're looking for first, and then figure out how what you probably can offer can be interpreted and translated in some ways to speak the language of that job.
That's wonderful. Thank you. And I do want to just kind of pause for a moment and just please remind everyone, please, I encourage you to submit your questions in the chat. We are excited to be able to hear from you all directly. And speaking of which, we actually have a question from Jonathan that I'd like to respond to, right? So this was a question really for me as an African immigrant, which I am an African immigrant. I think similar to Jonathan. Some of the ways that I kind of arrived at where I am, kind of similar to what you heard from the rest of the panelists. I've been with Eaton for quite some time and started my career actually in a similar program as Barish, in a rotational program. And so that really kind of opens up your mind to willing to learn, as Allison shared, and you're much more open and adaptable. And so I really took that early start and kind of forged that path of being open to different experiences, right? And so going into sales roles and going into more operations and business roles and working across the different Eaton segments, because Eaton is incredible because you can feel like you've worked for a lot of different companies because of all the segments that we compete in and still get to be with the same company. So you can make a lot of pivots with the same company. And so that has been a lot of what has led to my role now as a VP with Eaton has been really a lot of those experiences have really strengthened and I think has made me much more ready to be able to be in the enterprise role that I'm in now. So thank you, Jonathan, for that question. Really appreciate it. And so I do want to kind of continue our conversation as I heard kind of different things about what drove that pivotal moment, right? But if you can dig a little bit more, Drew, to, what is it that said, okay, this is a time I'm going to make this shift? Because that's a big move.
It was. It was. I think you should always listen to that little voice in your head. And you should always have a plan for your career. Even if you don't necessarily want to leave your role or your company, what does 1 year look like? What does 3 years, 5 years, 10 years? And I think the more I started looking into the crystal ball of my life, and frankly, where the industry was going, I didn't want to leave Cleveland. I didn't want to move to another city. I didn't want to travel as much anymore. I had done that, and I wanted a new challenge. And I'm one of those people that thrives on new challenges. And so all of that played together. I all of a sudden have kids, and I'm not there for bath time, and I'm working weekends, and all of those things just sort of start nagging at you. And so it wasn't like I'm going to go to Eaton and do corporate communications, but I had identified a field. I looked at places that were around my community that could be good employers. And it was really looking into the future, knowing that if I continue all of the same actions I'm doing right now, I'm never going to get to where I want to be. And of course, COVID, that of course, I think really, we were at home with more time to think about our options. And so I think that was a blessing in some ways to give me the space to really reflect. And I wonder if I would have been quite so determined had it not been that period of time. Yeah. But think about the future and realize that you're not going to get there if you don't start taking actions, even just very small ones today. And I realized that, I just couldn't continue the path I was taking.
Thank you for sharing that. Barish, what about you? What was that pivotal moment that created that shift and that pivot for you?
Yeah, so these moments, right? You make a decision and it's just changed rest of your life. So I think I have two moments like that. The first one, as I mentioned in the very beginning, when I chose to study a social science over the sports related studies, I think it changed the rest of my life, because if I just studied something sports related, maybe I would become a fencing coach, trainer, maybe opening my own fencing school. By the way, it's completely fine. I have a lot of friends who did this and they're so happy, but I just chose a different path. So I entered more like a business corporate world, and it changed the rest of my life. So I think this is one of the moments, maybe early life moments, that changed the rest of my life. And then the second one, I think, joining the Eaton as a part of early talent leadership development program, because it's such an excellent program that you are changing different countries, different product lines over different years, that you are really exposed to a lot of information, and at the end you just become like a Swiss knife. You have a lot of different skills that you occur from over the years, and then at the end of that you can just make a choice, like you like more commercial roles, operational roles, factory plant related roles, or more sales roles. So this brings a lot of different advantages. So in my case, I think joining this program and completing the program was the one of the this pivotal moments of my life.
That's awesome. Thank you for that. We have a question from Narlu, and I want Allison, if you wouldn't mind kind of taking this one, right? So we talked a little bit about the transferable skills and how to articulate that. I think Narlu is looking for a little bit more guidance on how do you communicate that well in a resume or a cover letter?
Yeah, I would say, I'm really big on the concept of storytelling. So I think any of the skills that you have, how can you put it in a really fun or digestible way that who is ever going to be reading your resume would automatically find interest in? And whether that is just through words or, I've seen cover letters and resumes over the years get so much more creative where there's even QR codes where the future employer can scan it and it may take them to a short video or samples of the work that the person has done. So I think it's really important to kind of, what story do you want to tell? And what are some of those key skill sets that you really want to make sure leap off the page? And how can you say that either in the most creative way, or if it is more of a show, how can you make that really stand out? So I also really recommend even using things like ChatGPT or Microsoft Copilot to kind of put your ideas in there and ask for creative ways to present that. With the rise of AI, we might as well use it to our advantage in situations like this. And sometimes I use that just as different ways to get kind of creativity or inspiration from. So I highly recommend maybe giving that a try as well.
I love that. Thank you for the suggestions. Some tips that I can also take, by the way.
Can I add on to that too?
Go ahead, please.
I was just going to add on to that because my resume was always a video. And, when you're in TV, they don't really look at where you went to school or necessarily, the list. And so you would have a resume tape and it would have a collection of stories and you would be hired based upon that. And the person on the receiving end knew by the size of the market you were coming from, the quality of the storytelling, whether they wanted to make a decision to bring you in for an interview. And I just wanted to add to what Allison's excellent points is that don't assume when you're switching industries that next person really understands where you're coming from. And it might just take that extra step to think about what might they not understand. In television, working in a large market means you're fairly seasoned. Well, spell out that, you're coming from market 10, which reaches this many households, which, fill in some of those blanks. And so if you're switching careers, I think really being clear about some of those things that other person may not understand and maybe over explaining it a little bit because they may not get it just because it's so familiar to you.
Oh, thank you for adding that. I appreciate it. Kind of staying with this thread a little bit on the skill set, right? So we have a great question from Ibrahim, and Barish, maybe you can take this one for me, right? So what are some of the skills that especially early career entry level applicants could be thinking about to make sure that they kind of shore themselves up for their future? What are some of those skills that are really important when you're starting your career?
Sure. So I think one of the biggest misunderstanding for early career starters that they are trying to put a lot of skills on their resume, but it's not they are looking for. So I would always advise to my friends on that they should not make this huge boring resumes with a lot of skills, because as a early career person they are not expecting this from you. I think from my understanding, from my observation, you just need to show your energy. You just need to show that, okay, I'm capable of doing this. I can bring my energy to the workplace. I will learn fast. I will adapt fast. I will communicate. I will just coordinate, collaborate with everyone. So then I will be sure that the job will be done. So I think this is the message that needs to be given. Whatever the job is, it can be something in the sales or it can be something in the plant. I think this is what they want to see. If this person as an early career person, so it means that the age is young, you just show your energy, you are capable of adapt fast and learn fast. I think this is what they are looking for in the very beginning. So I think the focus should be more like how is your adaptability level, your energy level, more than the specific skills, because nobody is expecting you to be a subject matter expert in your early career. You will be in some point for sure, but now you just need to show that, okay, I'm here, I'm ready, I can learn and I can do. That mindset.
That's great. I think Barish was great about that too, is what I'm hearing from you is a lot of those soft skills, like being collaborative, being willing to learn, right? Being open and not can translate to all different types of industries and fields, which is a really great thing. So thank you for that. Another question that came up, and Allison, I'm going to have you kind of take a stab at this one first. This is from Pratik. So as we have professionals, right, how can they consistently stay motivated and adapt to all of the changes that are happening in the industry, right? How do they keep their skills up to date?
Yeah, I think having a focus on having a true growth mindset is probably the biggest and best skill that you can have. So constantly be willing to learn, to ask questions. And I'm also really big on setting daily and weekly routines for myself. So as part of my morning routine, every day I take 5 minutes in the morning to just read something while I'm still really fresh. So whether it's a short article, whether it's maybe a concept or a definition where the previous day I wrote it down of like I didn't really have a good understanding of it. I usually take 5 minutes literally first thing in the morning to do that and to kind of let that process. So I think that's really important. And then something I've also been doing recently is at the every Sunday as I'm starting to kind of wind down, I take a few minutes to reflect, what did I learn in this past week? And really just take time to probably 20 minutes just to kind of think of that and mull that over. And then also I always make a couple of goals for myself of what do I want to learn this upcoming week, or looking at my schedule and knowing kind of what's coming at me. What am I going to need to be kind of sharp on, and admit at times I don't know what I don't know in that space, or where I need to brush up. So I'm really big on intentionality and just making sure that you're taking that time to learn, to reflect, and to ask questions.
Thank you. I have another question, and Drew, I'm going to have you take this one. So this is a question from Carlos, and it's really looking at Eaton. What are some of those skills and qualities that Eaton specifically looks for when we're recruiting for new talent to join an organization? And how does Eaton help those new talent integrate into our culture?
It's a great question, and I think I can probably offer a pretty helpful roadmap to it, because it's how we interview and it's how we look at candidates. So we have the Eaton leadership model, which is something, I'm not speaking out of school. We've shared this. It's visible in corporate reports. I believe it might even be on the web of what the expectation is of an Eaton leader. And at Eaton, everyone is really called to be a leader, regardless of your salary band, your role, where you sit, who you are. We are an inclusive company that values perspectives, but the things that really play into that is being ethical. And I'm looking in front of me because I wanted to make sure I could answer this, but ethical, learner, transparent, efficient, accountable, passionate. And so I think if you are going for a job at Eaton and you can demonstrate those in an interview, if those are qualities that you live by that define you, then I think that's really the first step. And I love how storytelling has come up. Tell stories around that. You may not have a specific apples for apples skill, but if you can demonstrate that you learn, that you're efficient, that you're passionate, you're accountable, I think those skills really play higher and are more important today than maybe we might have. We have a fresh value on them that maybe wasn't always there at companies, that I think you should lead with as you consider a role.
That's awesome. And I would like to add to that, right? The really amazing thing about Eaton is also our Eaton business system. And it's really our framework for how we run as an integrated operating company. And it's a big part of how we kind of ensure that the values and the culture, transcends countries, languages, and so forth, right? Because we really operate in the same way. We have the same values across the enterprise. And certainly for me, who has done a lot of different roles within Eaton, the Eaton business system is a big reason why I'm able to come into a new role and get up to speed very quickly, right? Because we speak the same language. We're using a lot of the same core processes and tools. And so I think that that's a big component. The Eaton leader model that Drew just described is part of that Eaton business system. So that's another really core way that we really integrate talent into the organization much quicker. And so I'm going to go back again to your careers, right? So a lot of pivots, a lot of changes, really amazing pivots. Let's talk a little bit about challenges. I'm going to start with you, Allison. What are some of the biggest challenges that you face when you're making a transition in the career, and what are some ways that you can overcome that?
Honestly, I think self-doubt and fear, so more internal, has probably been my biggest struggle, honestly. If I think back to even the earliest pivots where I moved from doing help desk to audit, and then from audit to data analytics, I remember, a little voice in my head saying, like, how do you know how to do this? Or, pieces of this, you don't know the whole thing. So I think, again, it just comes back to really paying attention to your thoughts, and what are you feeding yourself, and taking time to actively kind of weed out some of those pieces that aren't serving you. And just taking a lot of time to reflect and remember all the times that you were in a new situation, or where you were thrust into something that maybe you weren't quite comfortable with or quite ready, and yet you succeeded, right? And you grew from that. And so I think that's been the biggest challenge, is just to keep a really healthy mindset. And, I think it's good to still have a little internal doubt or fear, because I think that keeps us sharp, and that keeps us willing to, still want to learn and to do the right thing. But just the ability to do things scared. And that's been my motto throughout this year. It's okay to be scared. That's a natural emotion, but do it anyway. Take the next best step forward.
I do like that tip, though, of also reminding yourself of what you've been able to accomplish. Sometimes we kind of need that little reminder of what we've been able to do to propel us forward. Drew, what about you? What challenges have you faced, and how did you overcome it?
Yeah, Allison said self-doubt and fear, and I was like nervously laughing, because it's like uncomfortable to put it that clearly, because I think we all do. That was a very courageous answer. And I think that, thank you for saying that, because I do think that we all experience that, and I certainly did too. For me, being in a completely new environment, working a very different type of schedule, there was a learning curve. I think it took me at least a year to get my bearings here. I think in some ways I still am 4 years later. But for me, the bigger challenges were some of the things that I think in the corporate world, people might take for granted and maybe learn a little bit earlier on. And I was learning them late. And so my days would be configured by turning a story, going home, and not really having to think too much about work until the next day. Well, as we know here, we're managing, projects that have, short deadlines, long deadlines. We're working with people around the world, different time zones. Basic time management was a very real struggle for me. It was just not something that I was used to. Not to mention the fact that my technical skills and computer skills, centered around video and editing and, a totally different type of software system. And so it hadn't been like since college, and that was Windows 97, that I was really used to working on a basic word processor. I didn't have to do Excel sheets. I didn't have to do PowerPoint presentations. And so I think, having a little, and I was expected to in the beginning too, and really felt like, oh my gosh, I'm over my head. Fortunately, I was able to ask questions. I was able to find support. There were people here who helped. But I think it was really not leaning into that sort of fear and discomfort and being scared, but giving myself some grace to overcome some of that. But my learning curve was not in the writing. There were things that I could do that people were like, wow, you can do that so fast. And we're glad you're here. You have a different perspective on how to respond to that question or deal with media. And so I did feel, included, but for me, it was some of that small stuff that, if I would have really stayed scared, would have just could have been overwhelming.
Thank you so much for that. So I have another question from a LinkedIn user. Thank you for submitting that. I'm going to kick it over to you, Barish. What would you say has been your most important accomplishment at Eaton?
Okay, very, very good question. So if I answer this a bit in a generic way, I would say the completion of the early talent leadership program. It's my most important accomplishment at Eaton, because okay, the program sounds nice, but I would not say it's a very easy program to finish, because we are talking about a commitment here, and sometimes the motivation that you enter the program does not stay the same over the 3 years, because it means that you have to change every year, means literally moving from one country to another country. And I mean, how difficult it is to move one country to another country. You change everything. You show your housing, new job contract, everything that you change. You need to have a different step set up from the beginning, and it's only one aspect. Then you have to change your network, everything that you have to find. If you have a hobby, if you have something, you just need to find all these things in this new country as well. So this is one aspect, moving all the time, but in the same time you are changing jobs. So one department and another department. So in this program, you cannot stay in the same department for 3 years. So it means that you have to change. And since Eaton, it's a huge company, like really diverse company, sometimes a different department you go, it's completely unrelated what you have been doing it before. So in this case, you have to learn everything from the beginning, and you are doing this for 3 years. So I'm telling you, it's not something easy. It needs a lot of commitment, a lot of energy, a lot of discipline, and I'm really proud of myself and also all of my colleagues who finished the program. That I think finishing the early talent leadership development program at Eaton, it's my biggest accomplishment so far.
That's a great answer. We take that for granted. It's like Allison said earlier, like that is a major commitment and a major accomplishment. And it's very easy to forget that because we're thinking, well, it's work. It's my job. I have to do it. But that's incredible. So thank you for breaking that down. I'm going to kick it over to each of you, Drew and Allison, because I'd love to hear how you would answer that too. What would you say, Allison, is your biggest accomplishment at Eaton?
Yeah, no, I love that question. And, my mind was starting when Boris was answering that. I was thinking of, all the different cool projects that we've done from an IT perspective. But really, I think my biggest accomplishment is just being able to be 100% authentic me and bring my whole self to work. Honestly, I was worried about that early on in my career where you're getting, different feedback and mentoring and you want to kind of change yourself to fit the mold. And so I think it's been a big accomplishment where I've been able to stay true to my values and keep the things that are incredibly important to me. I still take time to teach yoga, for example, and I haven't let the IT side consume me. Or big part of my job is managing other people, and it's been so amazing to learn from them and to teach them from experiences I've had, and just kind of that reciprocal relationship and finding joy in that. And just looking at IT from a different perspective. I'm not really the typical, I like to think, IT person, so being able to navigate my career, but also kind of keeping that people element and the empathy side of it. And how do we incorporate that into some things like design thinking in order for our projects to go a little bit more smoothly? So I'm really proud of that and grateful for that, I'd say, in equal measure.
Thank you. What about you, Drew?
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm grateful to have been a part of some firsts here. Our first inclusion and diversity report, our first ethics report. We've become more externally focused on how we go after awards, have been a part of some nice new media recognitions for the company, getting us externally recognized on some pretty nice lists, which I think have been culture drivers. I think probably the thing that for me, because I do think it speaks to being authentic at work. For those who are at Eaton, you've probably watched or been to one of our Livewire events. We used to have town halls here every year that were very much kind of about the state of the business, kind of scripted, kind of removed. And we blew up the playbook on that. And I was part of the team that helped drive that. And much more casual conversations, much more off script. Even the way our leaders dress for these and the way they show up is very different. And so I like to think that probably my greatest contribution is being a part of some of that cultural shift, letting us relax a little bit and creating kind of communications that are not so, in the past and stuffy and business as usual. And that's more me. And I'm more comfortable sort of driving that than 4 years ago when, it was like, can we just loosen up a little bit? So for me, it's more so than any of those like on paper resume enhancers. When I show up for work and you feel that the dynamic is different, that people are more comfortable, that we're cutting to the chase. Having been a part of that, I feel like has been my most meaningful contribution.
Okay. Well, you all have done amazing things at Eaton. And I know you are going to continue to do amazing things at Eaton. So my question for you is, how has Eaton supported your development and your growth? And maybe what are some tips that you can give to our viewers on how they can kind of take control of their own development? I'll start with you, Boris.
Sure. So I will give examples again from the program that I did because it's the moment that I really felt the support of Eaton behind me. So during the program, as I mentioned, it's like a rotational program that we are shifting all the time among the departments and the countries. But the best part of it, it's a tailored program. So the locations are not fixed. It means that you can really discuss during the program what next role you want to take. And you are having discussions over the year. And based on the discussions, then you can tailor your own program. You want to move X country, Y country, that department, A department, B department, this plant or this sales office. You can really tailor your own program. So then it's a meaning that okay, you really feel that the company is investing in you. You wanted to learn different things, different areas within the company. So this is where you feel the real support. Addition to this, I want to talk about a bit mentorship and coaching. When we were doing this program, we always had coaches. It's like unlimited support because the coaches usually they were some old members of the program or the members who just finished the program. So we always had chance to discuss, ask questions to this coach because they just did the same path that we were doing it. So I think this was a really good advantage. In the same time, we always had mentorship support from the senior leaders, and it was a really good advantage because when you want to ask something more career related, more like future related, or do I want to need to focus here or here in my career, I think the senior leaders who passed this way some long time ago, they can guide you really well, like what you want to do. So I think this mentorships, coaching, all the tailored programs as a whole, it was a really complete package that Eaton supported me during my career growth.
That's wonderful. What about you, Drew?
Well, I think, when you're at a company with 94,000 people and customers in over 170 countries or whatever it is, the sky's the limit. I mean, the opportunities are there. I have felt very supported. I don't necessarily plan to switch out of corporate communications, but I feel like if I could, the opportunities would present themselves. There would be a way. Certainly, we have the mentorship programs. We have IERGs, Inclusion Eaton Resource Groups, which are an excellent opportunity to get leadership experience and to connect with different people who may not necessarily be in your function. I've worked a little bit with them, and I feel that's provided a great opportunity for growth. Eaton offers sprints throughout the year where you can just tap in, to a learning on a given subject. We have Eaton University, which is an online suite of tools where you can take classes in finance or IT or communications. And then if you wanted to, connect with the person who actually recorded and presented that class. So, and another one is I'm thinking is Stretch Assignment Marketplace, which is called SAM. You can actually, if you are stuck in communications and you decide you want to learn IT, there may be a project for you where you could work on a short-term project for a few months, gain some experience, and decide if that's something you might want to do more full-time. So if you want it, it's there. And I think that's one of the advantages of working at a company that is so big. And there's visibility into it. Our talent acquisition team provides opportunities to be matched to jobs that you may be interested in. And you may not be ready to make the switch, but they may reach out to you and let you know. So I feel like growth is one of the best parts about being here, because you really geographically, business wise, skill development wise, the resources are certainly here.
Wonderful. Allison, anything that you want to add?
Yeah, I would say really adding on to the points everybody else made too, but really I see it in three key ways. The first also is growth, where any time where I have felt kind of like, okay, I'm ready for something new, and I have expressed that, I have been met with a network who is more than willing to show me what is the other potential, where could I go, to talk through some of my interests and my strengths and where I might be the best fit. So I think that's been a huge blessing. The second is if I have been, expressing that I want to have kind of a new vision with how we do things. Like I was really passionate about organizational change management and recently about coaching and all the benefits of that. Eaton was kind enough to listen to that and see my vision for it, and then pay for me to go through the training and certification courses so that I could bring that into IT and the broader Eaton spectrum, which has been amazing. And then I'd say the third too is, although Eaton and my day job are incredibly important to me, there are things outside of Eaton that are equally important. And one example is I'm on the board for Salvation Army of Cleveland. And Eaton has been so gracious and just generous in allowing me to spend some time there. They have funded different projects that are near and dear to my heart there. So it's been really nice too that they not only value me, during kind of normal working hours, but the things that are important to me that are external and in the community, they've been equally as supportive there.
Yeah, no, I have to echo everything that you all have said. It certainly have been my experience as well. For me, you don't go from a plant manager to a sales director role kind of back to back without that level of sponsorship, right? So I think there's also that advocacy and sponsorship that a lot of our Eaton leaders show every day, and they're willing to kind of take a chance on you. And I think it comes down to, Allison, what you said. If you are curious and you're willing to learn, and you're willing to adapt and ask questions, there's tons of opportunities. I want to pause and again remind our viewers, please submit questions if you have any comments or questions for our panelists. Please do submit that through the comments, and we'll make sure to ask those. And so, kind of moving on, what advice would you give to someone? And Drew, I'll start with you. What advice would you give to someone who is looking at potentially making a career pivot or taking on something different within their current organization?
I feel so boring by saying networking, but I mean, talking to people is the best thing you can possibly do. Reach out to someone, take them to coffee, connect, maybe find out. I mean, maybe there are more clever ways if they're a part of an IERG, find something that you can mutually align on and work together with so that they get to know you. But I think, for me, when I was ready to do the move, I went onto LinkedIn and I looked at, okay, who at Eaton went to the same high school I did? Who at Eaton is connected to people within my network? I mean, I don't want to sound like a stalker, but like you kind of have to do a little bit of that digging. And I connected with them first before applying because I didn't want to put, an application in that I would regret or didn't have the resume that I wanted. You have to, don't rush into it. Make sure that what you're doing it the right way, the right letter, the right resume. But it was having conversations with people who were willing to talk to me to learn about what it was that I was supposedly trying to get myself into. And, and another bit of advice too, is that, we have the ability to, submit a resume for you. So if, I didn't do that in my situation, but, that's another way to maybe get an advocate on the inside or in that function or in that group before really going all in. I think you want to do your due diligence. Don't just go applying. Find out, and find out if people are happy there too. It may not be a good time to get into a function. Really gauge that pulse too. It's not just about, what you do in your role, but how happy are you? And ask some of those questions that we may assume, when we go in and use all of that together to then, calculate your move.
Thank you for that. What about you, Bursch? What advice do you have for people looking at a potential pivot in career?
Mm-hmm. So I think the main thing is being open and flexible. So what I mean is that you always need to be flexible, exploring for the different opportunities. You can do a role, you can be part of a task. You have been doing maybe the same role for a couple of years, but sometimes you need to know that being flexible can give you a lot of things because the world is changing, companies are changing, there are new structures, new functions are happening all the time. The pace is super fast right now, and now we have to be just part of this change. So being flexible, there is a role there, okay, I can go, I can do. Maybe from my experience moving different countries, different roles can help also, because what I observe most of the time, people who move often, they go up higher. I mean, I think you can relate from your experience as well. So just being open to move, keep yourself flexible. The time is not right, you will never roll because the time will never be right. But you just sometimes need to do it. Fortune favors the brave ones. So being open and just grabbing the opportunities is the key thing, I think.
Wonderful. What about you, Allison? What advice do you have?
Yeah, maybe to build a little bit on what Drew said too. I think just radical honesty with yourself of what do you really want and where do you want to go? And I think that makes the decision of what you say yes to and what you say no to that much easier if you really have that vision. I think back on my career too, and especially early on, there were different opportunities that I was offered that at the time, yes, it was an increase or it was additional responsibilities, but I knew it wasn't capitalizing on my core strength. And then probably the opposite, it was actually would be really heavy on things that don't come natural to me or things I'm not naturally interested in. So I had to keep that vision and know that although the progress might be slower at times, that it's the path for me, and I was being true to myself, and that I could go into my job every day and not dread it, and instead look forward to it. So I think that's incredibly important, is to know yourself, know what you want to do, know where you want to go, and not be afraid to say no if there is an opportunity that comes up that doesn't quite fit that for you, because you know it will be coming at some point.
Exactly. I love that. Thank you. And we are getting a lot of questions about kind of specific career paths. And so I want to please encourage everyone to check out our website, eaton.com/careers. And you can actually set up an alert there and get notifications for jobs that fit your profile. So please do take a moment and just take a look at some of the great opportunities we have within Eaton. And I know we're kind of getting close to the end here, so I want to find out what's next. So Allison, I'm going to start with you. What's next? What are your future aspirations and desires?
Yeah, funny that you asked that. I recently moved. I found my high school yearbook as part of the moving process. And in that yearbook, we were all asked, what do we want to be when we grow up? And I said I wanted to be a chief information officer at that time. And it's funny because that vision for me still has not changed. So I would love to just continue to grow in IT, continue to learn all of the different Eaton businesses and our operations, and how technology can really advance our growth goals and our strategy overall. And one day I would be honored to take on the role of Chief Information Officer. So that's where I see it heading.
That's awesome. Thank you. What about you, Barish? What do you see next for yourself or in the future?
Yeah, sure. So I think now I'm in a point in my life that's being a bit stable, because I have been moving a lot in the past few years, and now I think, okay, now maybe it's time to be stable and being a subject matter expert at what I'm doing. So that's my first career goal, I would say. But of course, I would never give up the continuous learning. So I will always try to learn more, understand more, maybe adding more product lines. That's what I'm doing right now. So always this non-stop learning that I will never give up. In the same time, I always want to profit from the mentorship as well, that Eaton offers for free. So always talking to people, having mentorship assistance, talking to senior leaders, seeking for advices. I think there's nothing wrong with it. So I will just continue to do that to be sure that I'm aligned with my career goals.
Thank you. And what about you, Drew?
I think it's just keeping the idea of growth very broad, thinking that it could be learning. A career move could be lateral, and it could also lead to your growth. It doesn't necessarily have to be, that next level up, although it's nice if it can be. Learning in place, I would like to, lead a team. I'd like to, I have ideas and goals for where I'd like to see us move as a communications function. But it may not always look like, okay, you get the next job up or that next title. There could be other ways to arrive there. And so, being open to change and being comfortable with change, and realizing that, you could be growing in many different ways. It's just not necessarily always the most traditional one. And I think by having kind of faith in the future, which, Allison alluded to, things do work out. They always do. And so things that I thought I've wanted in my life that I didn't get have turned out to be the best things. And so I'm just trying not to be impatient, but, really practical and just lean into other ways in my life that I'm growing and improving.
Oh gosh, I think it's absolutely incredible to hear from CIO to, growing in place and learning. I think I'm hearing a lot of similar themes, regardless of whether or not you are looking for a promotion or lateral. You have to continuously be growing, assessing, reflecting, how can I keep pushing myself and challenging myself? That stands true regardless of what that is. And so I really appreciate that. I want to first thank you all so much for, again, your transparency, your candidness. I think there were a ton of incredible advice and tips that were given, certainly some that I plan to take back as well. So thank you so much for that. I really appreciate each and every one of you. And thank you all for those of you who joined us. Appreciate all the great questions. And I would just ask you if you can hang on for just 1 minute. We're going to pop up a QR code. And you can use that to go straight to our eaton.com/careers. And if you're looking for your next opportunity, I hope you will consider potentially joining our Eaton team. Again, thank you all. Have a great rest of the day.
Thank you, Uza.